Hey everyone, this is Fernando doing another video for the Modern Survivalist, and I'm doing this video because it was requested through YouTube a few times already about my opinion on current events and the situation right now in US and where it's heading. I think it really hasn't changed that much since the last few years. It's still continuing in the same direction, which at least in my opinion is not very good. Now, having said that, before I continue, I'm not much for the drama and fear-mongering thing of predicting the US economy collapsing every couple of years or even every couple of months. That kind of fear-mongering thing is really not what I'm about. And can the US economy collapse? Of course, anything can happen. How likely, and that's the kind of word you should be going for, how likely is it in the following year or two? Not very likely. In spite of everything being possible, it is really not that likely that's going to be collapsing next year as some people like to predict. And when it doesn't collapse in the following year, they will say it's going to be collapsing the next one, and keep that going on for decades even. I've seen it, and for some reason people don't figure that out. That's someone predicting the end of the world every 6 to 12 months and that not actually happening, you would at least become suspicious. There's really not much of indicators of such levels of instability so as to make you suspicious of that, at least not in margins that should have you worried. I will say though that I think that what has been happening in the last few years is going to be continuing, and the slow decay of the lifestyle especially is going to be impacted. If you look at it, what's happening right now, we're seeing like several experts, so as to call them some way, talking about the recovery of the economy. Then we have other experts talking about the recovery of the economy really benefiting a very small margin of people that are already very well positioned themselves. So that recovery of the economy is not being much spread. It's mostly benefiting a very, very small amount of people that already have more than enough. So this is very typical of not developed nations, but more developing nations, as they're called politically correct, right? That's the kind of thing that happens in South America, where the famous phrase is, "It's great that the economy is doing so great. Too bad we don't get to see any of that." So in my opinion is that US, it's going to be getting a little bit more third worldly as time goes by. More difference between those that have and those that don't have, and the margin of poor people is going to be growing quite a bit in the following years. And it's going to be one of those things that a lot of people will look at it was like, how is that possible? We're supposedly doing better in the last few years, and still time goes by and people somehow end up having less and less and less, and their standards of living, their quality of life starts decreasing as well. And it's just not only on purchasing power, and inflation is a big factor as well. Even if salaries do go, for most people, for poor, for middle class, for even upper middle class, especially if you're not on the really top of the pyramid, for most guys, even though wages are going to be going up a little bit, they're really not going to be catching up with the real inflation. Another typical third world thing, which is that which is reported and what really is happening in the streets. You're going to be seeing this more and more about the official inflation not really reflecting what's actually happening on the streets, because there's always ways of manipulating that. And I was talking with a writer the other day, and he was we're talking about that thing about how numbers are so often manipulated. That's in Argentina, it's like ridiculous levels. It gets to a point where I remember actually that when asked about details of how come the official inflation in Argentina was so low compared to the unofficial one, which what it's called, like the changuito inflation, changuito being the shopping cart. You just notice that it's just with the same amount of money you're buying less and less of it, and a few months later you realize that with the same amount of money you have just half the cart full of stuff. Something is really not working. And when asked to the, I think it was the Minister of Economy, how is it that they come up with those inflation numbers so favorable? And you looked at the details. I mean, they were even, well, caviar hasn't gone up in price in the last year, and this brand of hair conditioner that comes from France hasn't gone up in price. So they would start pulling, ridiculous items into account and forget about really considering stuff like milk, bread, flour, meat, those basic things that common sense would dictate. They were looking at caviar, which no one buys in Argentina to begin with, so it really made no sense. Or a men's body lotion of some sort, ridiculous items that for some reason they weren't going up much in price. And even that, because you would be thinking, okay, if caviar is so freaking cheap, everyone should be eating caviar. No, they would take it. They would take that particular item into consideration, and maybe it was imported by a guy, and there was a handful of boxes of this stuff in the entire country. But it gets to that ridiculous level where you start seeing, it's a waste of time trying to justify and explain how it is that they're cooking the numbers. They're just doing it. They're just making up the numbers, and you just see that they're not reflecting the reality. So that's going to be happening, maybe not to such an extreme level as in Argentina, but it's going to be happening more, not only in US, but in several other places as well. In Europe, you see that too. The press, if you look at it, it really is, like a reflection of what happened in Argentina. It was indeed, an indication of things to come for the rest of the world. The way in which the press is always being manipulated, even more and more. And right now, you can just pick up the remote, change channels, and you see this is official. This is sided with the government. This is the opposition channel. And the scary thing is when more and more channels start singing the same tune, which is according to the government. It's becoming harder and harder to come by real independent news. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty much impossible on TV. Basically, you have to go online to find a lot of that stuff, and even that, it's getting harder by the day. So less freedom of press, more inflation, more degradation of quality of life. It's not just about the stuff you buy. It's about the quality of education in schools, the quality of infrastructure in general, all little by little lacking. So that's what I think. Trying to answer the question, that's what I think people in U.S. are looking at in the years to come. Not only U.S., in Europe as well. And the only way of it's not about going nuts over it, because there's really not much you can achieve by running scared with something like that. It's just a matter of understanding what's going to happen, be as prepared as possible within reason, not taking any drastic measures, especially anything crazy, because it is not the end of the world. It's the same old world, just getting a little bit crappier, if we have to put it some way. Just make sure you don't get caught by surprise. Understand that this will come along with more troubled circumstances related to job and employment. It's gonna be getting harder and harder to find work for future generations. They have to be much better prepared than the previous ones, because it's going to be more competitive, more guys competing for the same jobs. So you have to be ready for that sort of thing. Be ready for a kind of unstable employment situations. You have to be very creative with the way you manage yourself in terms of safety in the streets. Little by little, we start seeing that as well, things getting a little bit more dangerous. What used to be the bad part of town, the dangerous part of town, you have to be even more aware of it and more careful about it, because it's going to be getting rougher than it was before. So just be careful not to get caught by surprise and that sort of thing. Increasing your level of security in your own home as well, because those things, and this is stuff that I get emails of all the time. People email me about what's happening in their lives and in their neighborhoods, and they're seeing more of this stuff. They kind of are surprised. I pretty much can tell from the emails, people being surprised. Well, they tell me this never happened before in my neighborhood. We never had a home invasion in my neighborhood, or a house being picked clean when a neighbor went out on holidays. Those things will start happening more and more. It's actually ironic, even all the people that I've read in recent times about guys that had maybe a holiday home, or a place in a cabin somewhere, but somewhere that wasn't occupied. More and more guys are reporting and writing about it in forums and emails about their cabins, their places being robbed and broken into. So they will say, "Oh, someone broke into my bug out location." Dude, if it's already now a place that you cannot keep safe, imagine how it's gonna be as things really start getting worse than they already are. It's gonna be happening more and more. You have to find solutions for that sort of thing. It's gonna be getting tougher. If I try to learn from Argentina, in Argentina you just cannot have an empty place. You just cannot have a residence, a house, a cabin, and let alone a cabin in an isolated area. You cannot have it empty half year round, because someone is unavoidably going to be breaking into and stealing anything they can, and you will just go back there, repair it, replace whatever got stolen, and they're going to be doing it again, time after time, until you get tired of it and finally end up selling the place. So these are all things you have to find solutions for, or at the very least understand that it is going to be happening, and it's going to be happening more and more as time goes by. So it's better to be just realistic about it and be as ready as you can be and adapt as needed. Guys, just a little bit of my opinion on where things are going. It's really not that dramatic, but as always, it's better to be prepared. Guys, take care, have a great day. Remember to subscribe. See you on our next video.